Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about Melania Trump and Truth About America, American Patriot Jim Ryan, Congressional Medal of Freedom winner, star Olympian, and former member of Congress joins me, and LeBron James, meet John Ponder. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And hello again, and welcome to America Can We Talk? I'm Debbie Georgatos. We're switching things up a little bit in the show today. I'm going to go right to our interview because we have a wonderful guest online, Jim Ryan. And if you're thinking, I know that name, I'll remind you very quickly, he was the person who broke the 4-minute mile barrier standard. Pretty amazing tribute by itself. He also is a fabulous Olympian athlete. He also served as a member of Congress for 10 years. And I want to just read you something he wrote about his life. He's just a stellar American. He and his wife are the parents of 4 children. With his sons, he wrote 2 different political books, which we're going to talk about. But I first want to just read you a little clip about him because he was in fact, my husband commented this morning, he remembered seeing the Sports Illustrated cover and seeing Breaking the 4-Minute Mile and Jim Ryan think, oh my gosh, this is like the coolest thing ever. So we have him on the phone, but first I want to just tell you one thing to introduce him that he wrote about himself in describing his moving forward in running in high school. I couldn't do anything else. When you're cut from the church baseball team, the junior high basketball team, and you can't make the junior high track and field team, I'd go to bed at night and I'd say, dear God, if you've got a plan for my life, I'd appreciate if you'd show up sooner or later because it's really not going very well. I found myself trying out for the cross-country team and running 2 miles, even though I'd never run that distance before. All of a sudden, I made the team, I got a leather jacket, and I started thinking, there's a girlfriend behind the leather jacket. But that's how it all began. So that is a quote from Jim Ryan, our guest joining us today. And we have him on the phone. But I want to start asking Matt the Wonderful to put up his picture. You can see who this famous American is. And welcome to America Can We Talk, Jim Ryan.
Debbie, nice to be on with you. As you told that story, I was able to share that particular prayer and some of those comments at the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And it's really true. It all began with a simple prayer.
Okay, well, that was my next issue to go to, but let's go ahead and do that first. So very recently this year, Jim Ryan was awarded the Medal of Freedom by President Trump, and Matt the Wonderful has a picture of that. I have that sent to him, just him getting that award, which is just, did you just not love that picture? Love both. Of course, we know we love President Trump. Love Jim Ryan, that look of gratitude and pride and smiling. So tell us a little bit about just getting the Medal of Freedom. There aren't that many Americans who did that. How did that whole process go? Did you find out months ahead? A week ahead? How did you find out you were going to be awarded the Medal of Freedom?
Late last year, our son, who has a very good relationship with the president, in fact, the president calls Ned on different occasions, when he makes comments on some of the networks, primarily with Fox. And they're not always favorable. Ned is one of those guys who, our son is so, how do I say this, he reads the bills, he understands what's in there, and if he disagrees with the president, he'll say something, but more often than not, he agrees with him, and he supports the president. Let me make sure you get that out of there. So in the process of conversation, he went in to meet with the president, and the president said, let's see, wait a minute, last name is R-Y-U-N. Wait a minute, is your dad Jim? And Dad said yes. He said, oh, my gosh, I love your father. He said, I want to give him, over the course of a couple conversations, I want to give him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So that came up late last year, and I think they were going to try and do something in March. In February, we finally got an official notice from the president through our son, Ned. He surprised us over a meal at his house. Said, Dad, here's something the president wants to do. And then along came COVID, so it had to be put off until July 24th. So it was a tremendous honor. In fact, our youngest daughter, Catherine, kind of captured the moment a little bit. She said, Dad, as we were gathering, getting ready, she said, this is pretty special. you get to do this while you're alive. Some people don't. So it was a great honor.
It certainly was, and actually I will tell our listeners it's through a mutual friend, a friend of ours in Dallas who's also a friend with the Ryun family, who made this connection for me. I'm very grateful for that. Grateful for this opportunity to talk with you. Really just an American held in the highest esteem by many, many people. And since you're talking about your sons, let's jump into that for a moment. So you have I know you have 2 daughters, 2 sons. Your 2 sons are Ned and Drew, and they're both very politically active. And I'd love to have you tell them, our listeners, a little bit about they founded, I don't know if they both founded or they worked together, but the American Majority. Is that the name of their group?
That's actually the group that Ned does, and that's basically an organization that trains individuals to help candidates run for office. So knowing from my experience in running for office, which was the first time, go get 'em type thing, way back in 1996, he recognized that what we needed were good workers, but a lot of the workers don't know what to do or what to expect, and so that's what American Majority is about. And along with that, he's had thousands of trainees, and so he still trains people. They can go to AmericanMajority.org, find out how they can help, which I would encourage people to do, because this is one of those critical, pivotal years of an election that will decide a lot of the future. But AmericanMajority.org does train individuals to run, the staff to help individuals run for office. And I also work with Ned on a program called Madison Project. We help identify full-spectrum conservatives running for either the Senate or the House. And we work with the president and the campaign, and he's excited about the candidates we have, so they can go to MadisonProject.com and learn more from that.
I just love that. I love all the things that your family does. And I'm going to jump around a little bit, but you and your family, in fact, we have a picture of your family. Maybe Matt, look at that big family, that big, beautiful American family. So you and your wife have 2 boys, 2 girls, and a lot of grandchildren there. It's a beautiful family. I love that. So I want our guests to see that. But I want to ask you, how did you, in this era where many people are lamenting that their adult children don't seem to have embraced the values of pro-America, faith, their Christian faith, their pro-American values, that somehow as our country has seemingly become more secular, we have more students going through high school and college getting kind of sabotaged as compared with what they were taught in their homes. So you managed to have your sons emerge so conservative and so active. So I'm sure our listeners would love to know how you managed to do that.
By the grace of God, to be honest with you, Debbie, my wife Ann and I, 2 things that I would offer this for your listeners: intentional parenting, and then living your life in front of your children. And by intentional parenting, I mean this: that as little children, and as they grew up until they left high school, actually we still do it as adults when we're together, we have morning devotions, and those morning devotions can be something as simple as Daily Bread, which you can get for on your phone as an app, or like this morning I shared with the family, actually just Ann and Catherine are around. I have a devotional that I do in the morning. Part of it is from a book, Then Sings My Soul. And so I happen to focus on the hymn Revive Us Again, written by William P. McKay. And so I share with them, some of the principles that came out of it. This man who became a doctor, and his mom kept praying that he would have salvation. And it wasn't until late in his life, after he'd gone through a number of different things as a doctor, he was treating a man who was going to die, and the man wanted his Bible, and so they brought his Bible in, and he died. And the story goes on that at the end, when his belongings were being separated, the doctor happened to ask about the book, which was the Bible that the man relied upon. And so he opened it up, and he found out it was a Bible his mother had given him intentionally as a young boy, and his name was in it. And so it was one of those moments of conversion. So just sharing things like that in devotions. We used to do, part of our devotions, hiding place. But intentional parenting is a big part of that. And then a second part, I mentioned, making sure you live your life in front of your children. We're very pro-life. In fact, going back to Madison Project, full-spectrum conservatives mean that they are pro-government, pro-small government, pro-lower taxes, strong military, and they're pro-life. And so living that in front of our children, we actually took them to the pro-life march in Washington, D.C. In January a couple of times, so that they would be living that aspect of our lives together. So intentional parenting, and then living your life in front of your children so that they see what you really stand for.
Those are beautiful answers. And I must tell you, actually taking your children to pro-life march, it does help kids, especially if you're in a smaller community and your parents teach you things at home, and you may get the impression, well, this is just my parents who think this way, or my parents in my church, or our little community. But when you go to that beautiful pro-life march in Washington and you see not just the large crowds, but the excitement and the happiness and it's filled with love of life. And I think that whole tone emanates throughout that event. So that was a great idea. Great idea.
Well, and I would say making sure that you pray a lot, because, circumstances change and you're imperfect. Ann and I would say we were imperfect parents. We really were. And by the grace of God, our children turned out not only walking with the Lord, but the conservatives. In fact, I remember, it's sort of a funny story, when we ran for office the first time, we knew we'd helped others run, so it wasn't like it was brand new to us. We'd gone door to door. And so once the decision was made, I heard something out in the garage. It was our oldest daughter, Heather. She'd gone out and gotten a 4x6 piece of plywood, was writing on there, Ryun for Congress. And we lived in the country, so she called it out, stuck it in the ground out in front of our place in the country, and was ready to go. So, living your life in front of them so that they could participate as well. And it was very much a family effort in 1996 when we ran for Congress the first time.
Jim Ryun, it's a beautiful story and great advice for parenting. I do want to turn to your time in Congress. You served in the United States Congress representing the 2nd District of Kansas for 10 years, 1996 to basically January of 2007. And today, in 2020, people talk about how divided America is. Across the country, there seems to be such a toxic political environment in this country. And in Congress, you have people in Congress who simply, the two parties, at least as they're out facing to the media, they don't get along, they don't agree on anything. There's a very difficult time getting very much done. So what do you think accounts for, or do you think is how it is today very different than it was when you served in Congress ending in 2007, so 13 years ago? Was it always like this, or has it gotten worse?
No, I think it's always been like this, Debbie. It's just that we have a 24-hour news cycle, and people are much more aware of things than ever before. Let me give you a little example of the partisanship that goes on. This is an actual story that took place. I was serving on both the Armed Services Committee, and just down the hall was the Financial Services Committee. And I just finished a vote on the Armed Services Committee. I was walking into the Financial Services Committee for a vote, which, your staff is there listening so that when it becomes your turn, you can respond knowing what the issue is, where you stand on that particular amendment or whatever. And so we walked into the room in Financial Services, and I turned to my staffer that was there. First of all, you turn to the person who's recording the vote, and you say, "Madam Chair, how am I recorded?" Well, you're not recorded. That's so you can stall just a little bit, and turn to your staffer and say, "What am I on this vote?" And in this case, you said you were a yes. So I said, "Madam Chair, put me down for a yes." So right behind me came someone in opposite position entirely, Barney Frank. And so, he walked in and he said, "Madam Chair, not how am I recorded, how is Congressman Ryun recorded?" She said, "Well, he's a yes." And he said, "Well, put me down as a no." So,
oh my gosh.
This has been going on forever, but I think now with the 24-hour news cycle, you have much more attention being drawn to it. And in some respects, that's good, because I think more people are tuning in instead of accepting whatever the major news networks are putting out there. And I attribute a lot of that to the president, who has drawn attention to the fact that there's a lot of fake news out there.
Oh, his fake news commentary, I know, is very, very upsetting to the fake news, because they have been, whether you like the term fake news or not, we have developed advocacy journalism. I would argue far more than there was at least 30 years ago compared with now. I think that the concept of journalism to report and let people hear both sides, it's not found in very many places. So at least that's how I see it. But I want to talk to you. You and your sons wrote some books. I love that too. What what is just a signal or sign of the wonderful relationship you have with your sons. So you and your sons, Ned Ryan and Drew Ryan, co-authored 3 books: Heroes Among Us, The Courage to Run, and In Quest of Gold, the Jim Ryan story. So first of all, I love that you did that. And tell us about the first one I mentioned, Heroes Among Us. What did you write about in that book?
The inspiration on that one came because it was during a time in the early 2000s when you had famous athletes identifying themselves as heroes, and I became annoyed with that, as did our sons, in that they're not heroes, they're well-paid athletes. And so we began doing some research, and they did the lion's share of the research, and they would go into the Library of Congress. As a member of Congress, they had access to all kinds of books, and so they would check them out. I would get them for them, and they'd read the stories, and that became the genesis of Heroes Among Us. We wanted to tell the story of individuals who had made sacrifices for our country that really contributed to the betterment of our country. So Heroes Among Us was written, in the early 2000s, again, wanting to shine the light on the real heroes and what they had done. Courage to Run was a 60-day devotional that we put together, which highlighted a number of things in my life, which we had a chance to reflect on, and bringing in scripture, again, 60 days, 60 different devotions, with the intent of just trying to share some personal stories and identify with scripture in a way that might make it more real. And actually, In Quest of Gold was written not with our sons, but with another man, but we're going to reprint it here within the next 30 days because it's one that's very popular and people are interested in. So, they'll be able to find that one not before too long here.
I love that, and I'm sorry, I thought all 3 were by you, with you and your 2 sons. And so your sons, I know the one who's running, is it Ned Ryan who's running American Majority? Which one is?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. I love that they're so active, and honestly, that is such a particularly relevant mission, and the Madison Project, both of them. They're just, they're people trying to strive to preserve America. So you, yeah, do you want to say? Okay.
No, I'm agreeing with you, and I think that's something, that we should not take for granted, especially in this election cycle. And let me just say this. I watched a little of the Democrat convention, very little, but I walk away from that with a very down feeling about what's going on in the country. And I'm watching parts of the Republican National Committee, the convention, and the contrast is enormous. Let me say, as an athlete, when Coach Timmons, I ran under 4 minutes in high school, which at the time had never been done. And so Coach Timmons presented that goal to me, saying, I think you can be the first high school boy to run under 4 minutes. So that's one train of thought going on, being presented to me. And on the other side, I was listening to people who are, sports enthusiasts and runners, and they said, well, no high school boys ever run under 4 minutes. So it makes you think you can do that. And so the difference and the motivation was Coach Timmons presented a plan. He had a goal to achieve, and while it was his goal, I eventually adopted it, but I believed in what he could do, and that to me is the enormous contrast between the Democrat convention and Republican convention. We have trials in this country, policies that need to be put in the right place, and there is a bright future, but nothing is ever done in easy fashion. And running in 4 minutes in high school wasn't easy, but it was a challenge, and I think that's what people respond to. Challenge with optimism that there is a chance we can turn this country around, and I think we will with President Trump being reelected.
I think we will too, and I do want to get on to that topic. In fact, that's the next thing I'm going to go to after we finish speaking today. But my sense, it's an interesting to use the words you did in describing it, because the Democrat convention, I didn't watch all of it, but I did watch quite a bit, and not live. I watched it later, but there was just a darkness, a negativity about the idea of America, about the character of America, it just paints a picture of America as a really bad place full of all sorts of moral flaws and weaknesses. No country's perfect, no person is perfect, but the very character of America seemed, through the Democrat convention, we painted very dark, very negative, and that we're just kind of struggling in enormously terrible times. In contrast with what you're hearing in the Republican National Convention, there's just a sense of America's goodness and the goodness of the American people. And I love your point, too, about a plan. You hear President Trump, he has his new thing, I think it's 49 points and 10 subject areas. They're very specific things he's identified. We're going to shoot for this and then this and then this. And they all have an underlying assumption that America can be good and be strong and get better and grow and continue to thrive. So I'm glad you had that observation too. So, I mean, is your sense that I love that you are, you have that sense about the RNC. How do you feel, are the Republicans, you think, going to be able to pull together in this election cycle and get us over the finish line? What's your sense about how things are going?
I think the ones that really believe in America will. Let me go back to something you asked earlier, and that is, has Congress become more contentious, fighting and going on now more than ever before? It's always been there. I can say that from when I served in Congress. It's just now that people are starting to see that. And so the solutions most Democrats offer are based on emotion. They're not based on reality, and they're not based on sound financial direction. And so that's what's happening now. We're really seeing a lot of the difference between the two conventions I see is that the Democrat convention is focus on all these problems, but they always focus on problems, but they don't have solutions. They deal with your emotions. Whereas I see on the Republican side, the Republican National Convention, they have ideas. Are all of them perfect? No. Are all of them going to work? No. But at least they're going in the right direction, and there's hope in that. And that four-letter word is so critical for this election November 3rd and for what's coming up. We have to have hope. We have to believe in America, and by the grace of God, I think we'll be able to get there again.
I do too, sir. I actually feel very optimistic about this election cycle. And I do think even though there is toxicity in the American, in the media, and the portrayal of America, I do think that many of the challenges we're facing, both with COVID and with the riots and protests in the cities, it is causing a lot of Americans to think about what kind of a country we are, what kind of a country do we want to be, how much do we value freedom, how much we want to work harder toward a better and greater America. And I think it's helping people feel inspired almost, even though obviously we don't wish we ever had to go through the challenges we're going through. But I think it's causing rethinking in America. Do you see that too?
Well, I do, and I think one of the things that's happened very unfortunately is that we see people who are afraid to really express their opinion because they're afraid of the consequences, and yet they're very committed to, let's say, for example, they're afraid to say they're going to support Trump because they're afraid of the consequences that go with it. In fact, I saw polling not too long ago that I think there's as many as 60% or 60% of a number that's very large that are afraid to express their opinion because they're fearful of the consequences. Let me give you a personal example. It was during the McCain run for office. We live not far from the Capitol. And so one evening when I was serving in Congress, I'd gone back home. I was working in the district. It was late at night, and there was a knock at the door and a ring at the doorbell, and my wife went down, and there stood several policemen, several firemen. What had happened is someone had set the sign, the McCain for President sign, on fire. And so all of a sudden, as it happens in D.C., you get several fire trucks and the police coming in, and I knew I was a congressman, so they want to make sure everything was okay. That's why people are a little bit afraid to express themselves, because they're not sure that if they do, they might not find a brick through the window. Again, burning down the presidential sign in our front yard was an indication of just a hostility to be there, which, we've always been able to express ourselves as a country, but we've become so hostile in terms of how we view somebody else. It's very unfortunate that people are afraid to express their opinions.
I agree. Actually, in this election cycle, I will tell you, we live in Texas, Dallas, Texas, where people around the country think, oh, Texas is so conservative. Dallas isn't so conservative, and there are plenty of people who won't put up a Trump sign in their yard. I know them. I know they're going to vote for him, but they're not about to do that. They fear not just strangers driving by, but they fear their neighbors. So it's a very challenging thing and a very unhealthy thing. It's one of the things I talk about a lot in the show.
It really is.
Yeah. The idea of America, you're supposed to be able to have the robust debate of ideas, have a conversation without ad hominem attacks, without getting personal, just to say, I believe in X and not Y. Why do you think that? But, it goes back to your point about the arguments made by the left. Because they're based on emotion, there isn't a logical response. You never have a logical connection to even discuss whatever the issue is that you disagree about.
So let me give you another example. This is one of the reasons that the media is frowned upon so often, and why the president calls it fake media. If you recall, in 2000, there was this little issue called Y2K, and would the world stop and fall apart January 1, 2000. And so in advance of that, I had the chairman of the Y2K committee come into my major city, Topeka, Kansas, which is also the capital of Kansas. And so prior to that, I had arranged with the newspaper, my office put an ad in the paper advertising that the chairman of the Y2K committee, which is very special to have him come, would come into Topeka. He went to the largest room we could rent at that point, which was the Supreme Court office, or Supreme Court area of the Capitol in Topeka, at the Capitol. And so we arranged, we had a tremendous turnout, great attendance. Actually, people standing in the hallway wanted to hear what the chairman had to say. And towards the end of it, this young woman stood up and said, "Congressman, I work at the newspaper." She said, "I'm the person who received your call advertising for the Y2K seminar here, find out more about it. I don't see anybody here from the newspaper or nobody here from any of the news services." And so that's a part of what we struggle with as conservatives, is getting the attention of the media where they'll come and listen because you're considered a conservative and they don't really want to know what you're doing. And so that was a struggle I went through. And it's not unlike what President Trump is going through. The fake media has an agenda. It should be journalism. I graduated in photojournalism. It's supposed to report the facts, not your opinion. That's supposed to be for the opinion page.
Jim Ryan, you are a national treasure. As I say, my husband was excited to hear we were going to have this interview today. So we've been speaking with Jim Ryan. He is an author, as you heard a moment ago, an Olympic track star, the breaker of the 4-minute mile. I was going to make a joke, but I couldn't run a quarter mile in 4 minutes. But, you know, I do other I do other things well, but I couldn't do that. And served in the
I'm not sure I could do that anymore either.
Okay, fair enough. Yep. And served in the U.S. Congress for 10 years, but really known as just a widely loved American figure, a hero of sports. And actually, I meant to mention, participated in the 1964, 1968, and 1972 Summer Olympics. So still remains the youngest American male track athlete to ever qualify for the Olympics. Jim Ryan, I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today.
Happy to do it, George. Debbie, we'll do it again sometime, all right?
Absolutely, I would love it. Thank you so much, Mr. Ryan. Thank you. Okay, folks, I have to tell you, I wanted to do that because I knew he was waiting, and I want to be sure we get the interview in. So even though it's not really first, I want to go back to my first 5 topic, which Matt the Wonderful has everything ready, I'm sure. But what I want to talk about, we were talking with Jim Ryan about the convention and the Republican National Convention, and you know, I literally could spend the entire show today and tomorrow picking out little clips and saying, "Oh, listen to this, listen to this, listen to this." But I can't do that because it is, you know, not the right use of my time. But I want to say there were several stellar things at the Republican National Convention. The opening point I was going to make, which we already made talking with Congressman Ryan, was that you just sense a brightness, an optimism, a sense of hope, ideas just kind of exuding from the Republican National Convention, from a variety of the speakers, just the whole attitude of just upbeat, positive, this is America, we can do this, we can fix our problems. There was a great speech by Melania Trump. I'm just going to play a very short segment of what she had to say. She hit on a lot of great points. I will tell you that I found a transcript of her entire remarks to the Republican National Convention that she made. There's a transcript of them. You can find them on our website, americacanwetalk.org, because I thought she was eloquent, gracious, complimentary, but she also said some fairly profound things, some seriously profound things. I want to ask Matt the Wonderful to play this clip, and then we'll talk about it.
Growing up as a young child in Slovenia, which was under communist rule at the time, I always heard about an amazing place called America, a land that stood for freedom and opportunity. As I grew older, it became my goal to move to the United States and follow my dream of working in the fashion industry. Like all of you, I have reflected on the racial unrest in our country. It is a harsh reality that we are not proud of parts of our history. I encourage people to focus on our future while still learning from our past. We must remember that today we are all one community comprised of many races, religions, and ethnicities. Our diverse and storied history is what makes our country strong, and yet we still have so much to learn from one another. With that in mind, I like to call on the citizens of this country to take a moment, pause, and look at things from all perspectives. I urge people to come together in a civil manner so we can work and live up to our standard American ideals. I also ask people to stop the violence and looting being done in the name of justice, and never make assumptions based on the color of a person's skin.
She was stellar. First, I'll make some comments about what she had to say. She speaks 5 languages or something like that. She's obviously able to speak very articulately in English with a beautiful accent. And she just, to have the confidence to go before a national audience, the entire country, she's fully aware of how, as soon as she finished speaking, in fact, even before she started speaking, there would be leftists who would criticize her choice of her dress, her comments. Why didn't she say this? She should have said this. Why? And she got up there and very gracious, very calm, very lovely, and she just exuded love of the American people. I love that she addressed directly the violence in our country. And she didn't just say, and this is an important thing as we go on talking more and more about, we'll be talking about what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin, today and tomorrow. We'll be talking about the tremendous tension we see in the American cities and the rioting. She didn't just do the rah-rah, police are right and all the rioters are bad. She didn't do any of she actually did, which is the higher ground. She actually went high as opposed to claiming, when the other side goes low, we go high. She actually went high. But she talked about the idea, essentially, in another way of saying it, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Everybody of every background, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Think for a moment how the experience, the episode that you're all talking about, how is it received or perceived by other people who don't have the same background as you do? She implored people to stop the violence in the name of seeking justice. I thought these were not just, they were thoughtful and they were substantive and they were healing. They were ideas. Now, obviously, she can't set policy and force everyone to follow her recommendations of listening to each other and stop the violence and put yourself in someone else's shoes. But she's taken the high ground, and the only ground you can take if you actually want resolution, if you actually want America to get better. It's the only ground you can take, is to say, you can't just say, this is one group of Americans with a particular race or ethnicity in their background and another group of Americans, and we're going to fight it out based on race. There's no winner in that. And so she's acknowledging that. She's acknowledging a higher, better thought about how we see each other, how we deal with each other. She addressed first of all, she addressed women getting the right to vote. She addressed COVID and, expressed sympathy for the families who had lost people. It was really a wide-ranging, lovely, loving speech, and really quite a contrast, in my view, to the attitude that emanated from the other side in last week's speech at the Democrat National Convention. 2 other highlights from this week from the RNC. One was that Nicholas Sandmann spoke. I had clips ready from him, but we just didn't have the time to get to it. Nicholas Sandmann is a young man who attended Covington Catholic, a private Catholic school in Kentucky, who went to Washington, part of a pro-life march, and he did a really good job. And the kid is 18 or something, or 17 or 18. And he knew he was speaking with the Lincoln Memorial behind him. He's speaking to a national audience, very composed, very serious, and basically said, I went to Washington because I'm pro-life. I support the president because this is the most pro-life president we ever had. I got a MAGA hat because I'm grateful for this president. And he was confronted by this Native American, just kind of perpetual professional activist and agitator. And when that person got in his face and banging his drum, he just stood there frozen. He didn't mouth off. He didn't make a face at him. He just kind of froze. And the national media, as you all know the story, I will skip all the details, went after him, labeled him. And what he said, though, at the RNC speech was that he's a good example of cancel culture, because his life changed forever that day. And no one in the media before they ran with these stories of accusing him of taunting some poor innocent guy who was standing around, making it sound like he was the aggressor. It was the most unfair, misjudged, just horrible attack on him. And he spoke about this, that my life changed forever. And I, Nick Sandman, I'm going to tell you I'm an example of cancel culture. And the media does this, and it is wrong. Okay, so that was it. And the last quick highlight from the RNC last night I want to quick touch on was just that President Trump did the naturalization ceremony. He was pre-taped, but they played it at the RNC, naturalizing some citizens, basically having people become citizens from 5 different countries. And it was just a portrayal of this is how you come to America legally. This is how you follow the process, and then you come, you get to have a ceremony, and you get sworn in as a citizen of the United States of America. It's a beautiful thing, and you could tell it was effective because it drove the left completely nuts, that they had to be the ones that had to cover it. And of course, they were very quick to say, well, he's against immigration. Who's he to say this? No, he's not against immigration. He's against illegal immigration. He's fine with and in favor of legal immigration, which is what was shown at that ceremony. So RNC, to me, it is just beaming, it's bursting with a positive, hopeful message about America. That's what he's doing. I love it. And it's a huge contrast for America. I had a friend call me like at 6 a.m. today to comment about have you watched the Democrat versus Republican convention? She's just saying the Democrats such a dark picture of America's past, a dark picture of our country, our culture, and no plans for the future except, complaining and don't worry, President in charge will fix everything. So I know one last story today on our show, and that was, I called this segment, and I think it's really important to understand what this segment's about, is LeBron James meet John Ponder. And so tomorrow we'll talk more about what happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. There was a shooting by a police officer, several police officers, of a black man, and there is going to be a long discussion afterwards. But I'm not going to get into the details of that until tomorrow. What I wanted to point out was almost instantly when the shooting happened, because someone across the street had one of the cell phone video cameras, they filmed it. And then so that you can see that the police officers are trying to restrain the guy. He was trying to get in his car. Police are trying to hold him back. They end up shooting him. He did not die, this individual, but he was, at least the preliminary reports are saying, he is paralyzed from the waist down. Horrific injury. I don't know all the facts. I don't know if the shooting was justified or wasn't justified. They're investigating that. But before the facts were known, you had this this decision by LeBron James, obviously one of the most famous athletes in the world, certainly the most famous athlete today in the basketball world. He tweeted out basically saying, and he did a little video in which he said, "We are scared." This is LeBron James speaking to America. "We are scared as black people in America, black men, black women, black kids. We are terrified." Basic message saying this gentleman who was shot by the police named Jacob Blake, that LeBron is saying this is an example of why black America is terrified. I don't think that reaction was justified because we don't know yet what led up to that, and it may not have been okay. The police shooting may have been unjustified. There will be an investigation already occurring, and there will be a prosecution if one is justified. But LeBron James jumped in, and this is instantaneous condemnation by LeBron James and others in the sporting world and the political world, instantaneous condemnation, which of course then led to riots, which led to buildings being burned. In fact, a church was burned down that had in its sign out front, Black Lives Matter. That church burned down, cars destroyed, buildings looted, all of this in reaction to that shooting. LeBron James deciding to jump on to the instantaneous reaction before I know the facts. It's just as wrong for LeBron James to do that as it is wrong for people to instantaneously conclude, and I don't know conservatives who do this, but I'm always told that, that there's always the argument among those who defend the police that no matter what they do, people on the right say, oh, it's fine. If it was a police shooting, I'm sure it was justified, an instantaneous acceptance of it. Neither thing is right. The answer is you investigate, you find out the facts, and then based on those facts, you move forward if any action is justified. But LeBron James jumping on that and talking about we are terrified in America Black people are terrified to live in this country. I want to contrast that with something that happened at the convention involving a man, I'd never heard his story until this RNC convention story, named John Ponder. John Ponder, a Black American whose quick story was he was in prison after I believe it was a third arrest for armed robbery. Actually got caught, armed robbery, sent to prison, and his story and his interaction with the officer, the FBI person who arrested him, and the President of the United States. This is I tell you, I got teary watching it. I'm going to collect myself because that's my job as a host. It is the most wonderful story. So Matt the Wonderful has this video of John Ponder.
John's life is a beautiful testament to the power of redemption. John grew up without his father. As he tells it, my mother was strong, but she wasn't able to keep us out of the gangs and off of the streets, and they were violent streets. At the age of 38, he was arrested for bank robbery. While John was in prison, he began reading the Bible and listening to Christian radio. One day he heard Reverend Billy Graham on the radio proclaim, "Jesus wants to be Lord of your life." On that day, John dedicated his life to Christ. He spent the rest of his time in prison studying the Bible. When he was released, he heard a knock at his door. It was the officer who put him in jail, FBI Special Agent Richard Beasley, who said, "I want you to know that I've been praying for you." In the last 10 years since John was released, he has created one of the most successful reentry programs, Hope for Prisoners in Las Vegas. I was glad to speak there earlier this year. As John says, Hope for Prisoners is a movement that began as a dream in a tiny prison cell and is now making a difference in the lives of thousands, truly bringing hope that there is an opportunity and a community that is waiting and willing to offer them a second chance.
I can't tell you how grateful I am to have the opportunity to speak here today. Not so long ago, my life was running from the police, fearing the police, and avoiding the police. Not because of anything that the police had done to me personally, but due to the animosity I had allowed to grow inside of me, making me believe that they were my enemy. But today, praise God, I am filled with hope, a proud American citizen who has been given a second chance. My transformation began in a prison cell where I found myself a 3-time convicted felon facing yet another sentence. I gave my life to Jesus and made him a promise that I would spend the rest of my days helping others like me. My first help and support came from the unlikeliest of places, the FBI agent who arrested me, Richard Beasley. He is now a dear friend and has been a source of encouragement to me throughout my entire journey. I am grateful for the men and women of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department who volunteer their time to people who are returning to our local community after incarceration. These are the real-life heroes who put their lives on the line every day, armed with the promise that they made to protect and to serve, have made a tremendous impact in the lives of men and women reintegrating back into our society. My hope for America is that formerly incarcerated people will be afforded the opportunity to take advantage of the fact that we live in a nation of second chances. My hope for America is that law enforcement and people in the communities across our country can come together and realize that as Americans, we have more in common than we have differences. My hope for our great nation is to continue on this path we are on of being the most prosperous country in the world.
Okay, is that the most amazing thing? And actually, Britt Hume commented afterward. I didn't see the show, but I read an article about Britt Hume commented that the biggest thing. So President Trump, at this RNC thing, pardoned John Ponder, which is basically a way of erasing your previous criminal record. But this is I just want you to think about what Ponder's saying about America, how he's this FBI agent who arrested him is now one of his good friends. This guy, John Ponder, is doing a whole program to help people released from prison. Trump, they called him in whatever it was, February, whatever they said, they had a graduating class coming out of what Ponder put together. Trump goes out there to speak to them and say, yay, this is great, move on with your life. This is not, America's not perfect. But the argument between the Democrat and the Republican Party is the Democrat Party is telling you America's mostly a rotten place full of evil racists, and look what happens in Kenosha. We don't even have to investigate the facts. As soon as we know that white police officers shot a black citizen, just another proof that America is evil. This is what the Democrat Party sells to the American people. This is what the Democrat Party sells over and over and over, that America is a place where there is no possibility of justice, there's no mercy, there's no goodness, there is not a country filled with good people, it's a country filled with evil people. This is what the Democrat Party sells America to get votes. In some strange way, and I mean this nicely, but you know the expression, a useful idiot? Like people who get manipulated and contorted into standing up for things that are really, really bad for them. Well, LeBron James, at least in this context, useful idiot. Willing to criticize before he even knows the facts, willing to say, oh, this is another example, this is a horrible thing, and see, this proves everything the Democrat Party says, that the country of America is filled with evil people and there's racism everywhere. Both stories can't be true. America is not perfect. There are certainly people who are racist in this country. Of every race, ethnicity, and national origin, of course there are people who are racist. This is the nature of human life. This is why we try to redeem and uplift and teach our children and teach young Americans the evil of racism. Of course there are some who are racist. The difference between the DNC, the Democrat National Committee, and the Republican National Committee is the DNC is saying it's everywhere, it's rampant, and the RNC says America's a country filled with good people doing great things, people who grant mercy, people who love their fellow man, people who try to help their fellow man. And in this particular context, a Ponder who found Christianity while in prison, gave his life to Jesus, came forward and did a beautiful thing with his life and creating this organization to help other people getting out of prison. This is a great example that President Trump showed at the RNC convention. This is real America. What Ponder's saying is real America. What President Trump did in going to Ponder's graduation for the group that he created to help people coming out of prison, that's real America. What the Democrat Party tries to sell America, the darkness and gloom and ugliness they try to sell all week long at their DNC convention, that is not the real America. They'll call out, and there are, of course, instances of racism. There are, of course, instances of police brutality. There are, of course, changes. Forever and a day, you're trying to improve the police department, is trying to improve training, trying to help Americans understand each other better. But the go-to position on the left is to assume America is evil, police are racist, police are brutal, this is a terrible country. The go-to position on the Republican side is this is a good country, filled with good people, filled with people that we should grant mercy when they have gone through a situation where they ended up in prison and come out. That is the difference. It's seeing America as good, having hope in America's future, belief in the goodness of the American people, while recognizing there are imperfections, there are bad things that happen, and sometimes we see things that are racist, or we see unjustified police conduct, and then we go after it, and we prosecute it, and we remove those people, and we start new training. We fix our problems. But we don't concede that the very culture and fabric of America, on the RNC side, the Republican side, the culture and fabric of America is good and noble. On the Democrat Party side, the DNC, the culture and fabric of America is evil. And so the Democrats' line goes, vote for us because we're going to fix those bad guys. We are going to fix things. Give us all the power and we'll take care of everything. There could not be a starker contrast, the American people are watching, between what the Democrat Party sees as America, what they believe about America, what they know about America, what they actually are going to base their policies about, their assumptions about America that shape their policies. Democrats see this country, the spokespeople at that convention and the candidates forever and a day on the Democrat side are filled with vitriol against the American people, presumption of racism, presumption of wrongdoing, presumption of police brutality. On the conservative side, the presumption is the American people are good and noble people. And we practice our faith, including this idea that when people have gone through circumstances, they've ended up in prison, and they get back out, we want to help them, we want to lift them up, we want to give them a second chance. That is the real America, my friends. And I think this convention, these past 2 weeks, are helping many Americans see the vast contrast between how the Democrat Party sees America versus how the Republican Party sees America, because there's no hope in what the Democrats are selling about America. There's no hope. There's just send in your money, give us more power, and I'll tell you the other reason there's no hope in the Democrat versus Republican way of seeing this thing. The Democrat Party, forever and a day, is forcing Americans into hyphenated groups, into silos. So you have African Americans and Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, and the evil white Americans. And forever and a day, they're pitted against each other. You have speeches, endless speeches on the American left, criticizing all people of certain skin colors. They can say all sorts of evil about white privilege, white people, just white race, not allowed to be honored or acknowledged that there are good people who are Caucasian. You can't say that on the left. The Democrat solution to everything is to pit people together. Stick them in silos and fight it out in those silos. Try to give one hyphenated group over some other group the advantage in some issue. On the other side of the aisle, there is America. There's the idea of America, the goodness of America, the rightness of America, the rightness of the founding ideas of America, the justice system, which everyone's entitled to, having the rule of law, equal justice. People are entitled to equal opportunity to move forward in this country, to find their place in the American dream, to move forward as Americans, to find their way, their path, their life, liberty, and their version of happiness. The conservative side is not going to get drawn down into black versus white. It's all the ideas of America, protecting all the ideas of America, all the individuals of America, together moving forward, calling out wrongdoing, calling out people who have failed to live up to that standard. But there is inherent division on the way the Democrat Party approaches things, and it is unsolvable. It is unsolvable. There's nothing the Democrats offer that ever gets you to a solution. It's always one silo versus another silo, duking it out, the Democrat Party handing out favors based on your hyphenated status. The Republican side is talking about America. The ideas of America is what Donald Trump ran on. It's bringing back the idea of America and encouraging the American people to come together, all of us, as Melania Trump said in her remarks, come together, all of us, as one community. All of us put ourselves in other people's shoes. Put yourself in somebody else's position. Think how how some situation may be perceived by them. Don't judge other people by their skin color. Don't go around assigning people, everyone you see, into the hyphenated group. See each other as Americans. Fight for the improvement and the betterment of America. That is the message of the Republican Party. It's a stellar convention already, and it will continue to be. I'm past my time going today, so I'm going to very quickly turn and tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we started our show today talking about the idea of Melania. We got to the first 5 today eventually. The RNC convention, the Republican National Convention, it's not about policy in detail. It's about understanding the truth of America's goodness and greatness and reminding all Americans of that truth. Melania is a true foreigner who wanted to see and become an American. Her RNC remarks were a breath of fresh air and common decency, compassion as to COVID suffering, hope and determination for the resolution. She says, take a deep breath and put yourself in the other's shoes as to our civil strife. These attitudes are not black or white. They're not male or female. They're not pro or anti-cop. They are American. RNC is delivering a masterpiece of bold colors comparison of the Democrat versus GOP visions for America. Americans want the GOP vision. And on LeBron, meet John Ponder. Kenosha is following a pattern. Leftist mainstream media pounce with evil racist America narrative after a partial video. No waiting for an understanding of all the facts. Skin color of the criminal is what matters. Celebrities mount as an anti-American Twitter storm. They mount an anti-American Twitter storm, and LeBron leads the way. Go straight to arson and destruction of innocent people and property in retaliation. Contrast that with the John Ponder story. It stands in sharp contrast. A black man redeemed from a life of crime through Christian faith. aided by a white FBI agent who arrested him and has since become his best friend. Developer of a prison transition education program honored by President Trump long before Kenosha or Minneapolis. Americans know that John Pounder's story is the true story of America. And that, my very fine friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Tune in every Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.